I think the transitioning of my process was very much one step at a time. Listening to that inner voice, listening to where I'm feeling led, listening to life, the circumstances, and choosing to take one step and see where it goes. And we talk about that in groups all the time. And I couldn't see the end, right? I didn't know what year it was I was going to sit before that board and become licensed, but I could take the next right step and then the next right step and do all the parts. And I guess that's what I would encourage a listener, because we don't get to see the whole picture usually.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. We're happy to be with you today with our usual host, Dr. Greg Miller. Greg, good morning. Unusual. Our unusual host, Greg Miller. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host. And today's special guests come to us directly from the staff of Faithful and True. We've got Russ and Susie Smidt, who are both members of our team here at Faithful and True. Susie is an LMFT, and she leads women's groups as well as counsels wives of the men that we counsel who struggle with sexual addiction. And Russ is a BCC life coach, and he helps and guides men, leads men's groups, helps us with the Men of Valor workshop. Susie also helps with the women's workshop, and together, Russ and Susie are leaders with our couples journey workshop. So with all that in mind, you must be exhausted.
Wow.
Because that's a lot of work, We're happy to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Great to see you both again. And we've been looking forward to this podcast because today's subject matter, I think our listeners are going to find very intriguing.
Absolutely, and that's a great introduction because...
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
I got up early.
Because what we're going to be talking about is the journey that y'all have been on individually and as a couple to get to the place of faithful and true. What's interesting is for most of us, when we were in college and exploring our lives, I don't think any of us assumed that one day we would be working at Faithful and True, and yet there are life circumstances that have brought us to this place. And I know that I work with a lot of men who at times consider the possibility of leaving their career. They are doing well in recovery. They discover they have a passion for this particular issue, and they wonder what it looks like to transition from one career into actually serving this population professionally. And so we thought that y'all would be a great couple to have that conversation with. And what's true is there are several of us here that this is part of our journey, but
Right.
Y'all really have been very intentional to find yourselves here at Faithful and True. And so we want to just take a moment to hear your story of how you found yourself here.
Great. Can't wait.
Thanks for listening on our next podcast.
How do you want to
Do you
start?
want to start?
Oh, sure.
How we found ourselves here?
How we entered the arena. I was actually thinking, if Mark he's a sports guy, so if we're kind of part of his coaching tree.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
So we're direct descendants of his coaching life, so to speak. So, I was, grew up with this addiction starting at age 5. And when I was 40, I finally found somebody in the church that I thought I could talk to and trust, and told my story. And then told Susie, and that was in 2001. And that's kind of how our story began. We often talk, I'm from Iowa originally, so we talk about me taking 40 years of manure and dumping it on Susie, and me feeling a lot cleaner and her feeling a whole lot worse.
Yeah. And we actually became clients at Faithful and True after Russ had a relapse about a year into the whole thing, and we arrived here, crawled in here, joined men's groups, women's groups, and started some regular counseling here for ourselves.
What year was that you guys came to Faithful and True?
03.
03.
Yeah.
Okay.
When y'all met in college, like, what was the expectation of what y'all would be doing professionally? What were the paths that you were on?
Good question. I consider this a third career. I was a teacher first, and then I was home with our kids second, and now this is my third thing.
How did you feel about teaching? Is that what you worked on your degree in and thought that that's what you were going to do professionally and felt a passion for that? Or did it seem like a good option or a logical choice for you?
It was a good option. I enjoyed it. I really had a strong desire, even in college, to be home with kids someday.
Were you ever?
So I'm grateful for those years.
Were you exposed to things in college, like a psychology class or something in education that kind of acknowledged or awakened this part of you that really engaged wanting to work with people? Or like, did you really see it more as educational and never as therapeutic?
I enjoyed those classes because, of course, with teaching, you have those classes. What I would say, though, along with that, is that I knew I was always a person who cared about people. And I didn't really try to attract it, but people always came to me
Right.
to talk to me about what they were going through.
Did you perceive that you were helpful? Like, did you have a sense of confidence, or was it kind of, did it flow out of you naturally, or did you feel inadequate in doing that?
Well, I think I was helpful, Greg. I think I was unhealthy in getting in their hoops, right, as we talk about here. But I felt effective, I guess, at caring for people.
Did you have a vision? Because you mentioned, 3 careers. So you were teaching for a while, and then you stayed home with the kids. Did you have a vision when you were staying home for the kids of what would happen once the kids were out of the home? Did you just assume you would go back to teaching? Or did you think, do I want to do something else, or do I never want to go back to a professional place?
I don't think I planned on going back to teaching, and I don't think I really knew what that was going to look like.
Okay.
It was interesting. I see this with the women we work with in groups regularly, where women return to things that are passions of theirs that they've gotten away from, lost track of, maybe weren't even aware that mothering, marriage, living with an addiction was pulling them away from. And so for me, that was a little business that I returned to, a passion of mine. And as our kids were going through the later grades of school, I was doing this business out of our home. And at the same time, I was here volunteering my time in women's groups, eventually becoming a co-leader with Debbie of women's groups. And so it was all happening, right? I was watching it all happen, and not really knowing where it was going to go, and I'll say becoming willing to go to graduate school.
How old were your kids when life exploded and you first came to Faithful and True?
Our kids were 11 down to 3.
Okay. So young kids at home when y'all first began your recovery.
Right. And then as I was doing this group work with Debbie, Sonia was getting into high school, and
With the 3-year-old, our first counselor was nice enough that she had a free office space that Max would watch videos in while we
would haul in one of those TVs that had the TV and the
Built-in VCR.
VHS, the VHS tape, yeah.
Yeah, so that was an odd part of his preschool thing.
Yeah.
You didn't mention what your business was, or you're not wanting to mention what it was?
Long arm quilting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because
Yeah.
I know that you're very gifted in that you have a passion in that. If you've ever been to the Faithful and True Center, you're going to see a quilt that Debbie created and made for the center, which is beautiful. Yeah. So did you, in this season, start engaging that business thinking, this is the direction I'm going to go? Or even then, was it an interest that you were able to generate some income? Did you have like a vision for the quilting industry?
Well, creativity was undeniable passion of mine from little. And I think in those busy years of little kids and Russ having really long hours at his work, I really got away from creativity in a lot of areas. It was a kind of a lost thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was a rediscovery of that creative passion of mine. As I was doing my recovery work, I was realizing that's also a piece of who I was created to be and what I was gifted at doing. And I made a little money at it, I'll say.
Very little.
It didn't support us.
Don't you think part of it, though, was the fact that you felt uncertain about your future in our marriage, that you wanted to have something financially to draw back upon?
It was really difficult for me. When life exploded, I found out about Russ's addiction and realized I could have gone back to my teaching, but I had really given up my college degree and my teaching for the purpose of being at home, which I loved doing. I wanted to be there, but now when I didn't know if he was going to get well, then I was feeling a little scared for myself and my ability to.
Well, I would think there's a huge vulnerability when you are aware that your income is based upon somebody else and you don't know the status of that relationship or whether or not it's going to be sustainable.
Right.
Do you find working with women that can be a fairly common situation where part of their anxiety is, I don't know if I can leave because I don't know how I would provide for myself, or I did step away from my career.
We do talk about that a lot with women, and some women are not there at all, but others, that's part of their recovery work, is to realize that come to a belief I could be okay if I had to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
A quick correction on credit where credit's due. The quilt that you're referring to in our waiting room was by Susie, not by Debbie.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Oh, it sounded like he had said that Debbie made.
No.
Yeah, you might have misspoke just.
You misspoke just a little bit.
Okay.
We're not going to start this podcast all over again to fix that one little thing. But I know that Susie said she kicked me under the table.
No, I didn't.
No, yeah.
It's a beautiful piece of art.
It was really a giving back piece for me for all that Mark and Debbie have done for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what is true also is that one of the things that when we started couples counseling with Mark and Debbie is we had so many common interests, and one of those that you had with Debbie is that she ran her own business and she was a very creative person, and you guys really connected on that level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you begin to be open to making this your profession?
I remember thinking that life is sweet. I have my kids. They're in school. They're growing up. They're doing, they don't need me 24/7 like they did when they were toddlers. I was coming over here to lead groups with Debbie. I was having the rest of my time to do this, have these customers come to my home and do this creative work for them. And I was thinking, this could be it. But all along that time, I'm getting these nudgings that, you should think about doing this work. You're kind of good at it. You should think about being a counselor. And I had a lot of my own inner searching, deciding in that, because I wasn't sure that I had the confidence maybe, or that was a pretty big undertaking at the age I was to go back to graduate school. The first paper I wrote in grad school I graduated from college in 1984. So it had been a long time since I had written
Technology
a paper.
had changed.
Yes.
There was no longer this Electra, with if you were really good, you had the corrected
electric
tape
typewriter.
in it.
Right.
Right. I remember those days.
So
too.
it was really a process, and I remember getting to this place where it just became clear to me that this was becoming a calling. That not to be super spiritual or anything, but this God was in this, kind of nudging me. You know how you say no to God, but it just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
This idea, and it was clear to me that He wanted me to go back to school, and so I finally just said, "All right, if this is something He wants me to do, He's going to be with me in the whole process," and that's what was true.
Did you feel a connection between your teaching experience and your counseling experience? Like, did the teaching experience kind of set the stage for your comfort level in counseling individuals?
Yeah, probably. There is a an element of teaching in counseling for sure, and standing up in front of even our audiences aren't like hundreds at the workshops, but that was uncomfortable to me at first, teaching, but it was also something that I was used to doing.
How long had you been in recovery when you decided to go back to school?
About 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at some point you realized, okay, if I'm going to do this professionally, I do need to go back to school. What was the process for you for looking for a place to go? What kind of were the criteria that you were using? How old were your kids at this point when you started going back to school?
When I went back to school, our middle son had just graduated from high school. Our oldest is a daughter. She was in college already, and Max, our youngest, was starting high school.
So at one point, 3 of you were in some sort of
Which was another thing.
Higher education.
Why in the world would we pay another tuition, right? When we're already, yeah. 3 of us were in higher education. I used to say to Max, we can do our homework together. And he was like, never interested in
Cool,
that.
Mom.
surprising.
Really
Yeah.
cool.
No, we could study together.
So what was the process of deciding where you were going to go to school? What was the criteria that you were using?
I was there were about 5 programs right here in Minneapolis area that I looked at. I looked at some of them were programs where you kind of traveled through with a cohort. And that sounded nice to me in that you'd get to know that group of people as you went through. But I was worried about the lack of flexibility in that with busy life, right? So what if I had to take a class off, or then I'd be behind? And so the Adler Graduate School that I went to had a program that I think is designed really to fit really well with returning students later in life, where you take one class at a time. You can actually just take a break sometimes and not take a class for that 6-week or 8-week session. And that really appealed to me a lot, even though I only took advantage of that, I think, one time where I took a break. But it turned out to be a really good fit for me.
And what's true is, even since you went to school, one of the options that are out there is online learning, where it's possible to get an entire degree now and it all be online and be through technological resources. So having to travel somewhere to get it isn't even necessary given our current circumstances.
Yeah, that's true. And even students that I took classes with, a lot of my fellow students were taking some in person, some online. For me, it was located conveniently, and I took all my classes in person.
Russ, how was it for you when Susie was...
Awesome.
Okay, moving
Thank
on.
you. And
No, it was, I had to pick up some of the slack, but I would say that the biggest thing for me was I was excited about it. I know there was tension when you would obviously get stressed about. I mean, I didn't want to write a paper either, but technologically, I think we both tried to work through that together. I think I did study with you sometimes, even though Max didn't want to. I found it super interesting what she was learning, and I'm pretty sure if when we have another child, he's going to be Alfred. Is going to be his name.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have some news to announce today? Or
Not yet. Fingers crossed.
He was always really supportive of the journey for sure, which I needed because I was taking this a step at a time. I thought, well, this is clearly a leading that I'm feeling. I'll take one class and see how it goes. And then it just
one thing led to another.
Yeah, then I just was it was a little over it's about 2.5 years of classes.
I would definitely think this idea of feeling supported by a spouse while you're going through this is incredibly important.
Super important.
Because part of it is you are professionally operating out of the context of that relationship. That if you're going to be working with couples, part of what you're bringing into your expertise and your understanding is your own experience and your own recovery as a couple. And so being able to navigate this with some of the healthy things that we've been taught probably is important in getting through the process.
One of the tricky parts was, I think, for me to figure out how to stay in my hoop, to encourage her without jumping in and telling her what to do when you were trying to go back to school, which was hard for me because I really felt like it was a thing she would do extremely well. And so it was difficult. I remember trying to draw the line between encouragement and pushing. And since we were 10 years into recovery, so we were a little better at it, I think we wouldn't have been able to do that early in recovery if you'd decided to go back to school. I don't think I would have done that well at all.
Well, and my sense, Russ, is school is a place that you kind of operate well. It's your safe place.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense kind of out of that perspective wanting to encourage / challenge, engage Susie in school itself, because you like being in school.
Well, that was a problem.
I think he was a little jealous at times that I was the student.
I was the only one that wasn't going to school. And the whole thing.
That's true.
The one that was left out of the academic pursuit.
I felt not included.
And Susie, you kind of alluded to anxiety. What else got stirred up for you as you were really making a significant shift with a huge investment of time and energy and resources?
It's kind of this change in how I see myself. I saw myself as a mom, a wife, a quilter, all the church activities, all the life, but to come to see myself as a professional person was a process for me. One of my good friends calls it professional efficacy. To come to feel like I'm also this.
And capable. It's having a sense of not only do I define myself in this way professionally, but I also have the capacity to be effective in doing this. And I think for all of us, at points along the way, we regularly ask ourselves, am I making a difference? Am I being helpful? Does what I do matter?
Right.
And we know that it was helpful when other people, were in our lives in this professional role, but maybe it's our natural tendency to question if we are effective or if we're going to be effective.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when we do women's groups and we welcome new members, we always do introductions. And one of the things I frequently say is I felt the calling for sure. I also felt such a deep gratitude to the people who had been there in the flesh for us when we didn't know there was a way through this, much less a way to thrive past it. And so that gratitude also led me to this decision that, all right, my kids are almost out of the house, and this would be a perfect thing to do with my next chapter.
If someone is listening to our podcast and they are considering the possibility of something new, is there some encouragement or some direction that you might provide for them based upon the experiences that you've had?
Well, I think the transitioning of my process was very much one step at a time. Listening to that inner voice, listening to where I'm feeling led, listening to life, the circumstances, and choosing to take one step and see where it goes. And we talk about that in groups all the time. And I couldn't see the end, right? I didn't know what year it was I was going to sit before that board and become licensed, but I could take the next right step and then the next right step and do all the parts. And I guess that's what I would encourage a listener, because we don't get to see the whole picture usually.
Well, and I often tell people gathering information many times is the next right step.
Right.
You're trying to make a decision, but you don't have all the information that you need. So just seeing what resources are out there, or what would it require for me to be able to make this transition. And that information is part of the process itself.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that you've also told a lot of women, and I've told men in my groups, that they need to get a fair amount of ways into their recovery before they consider going into a counseling role?
Yeah, that's a good point to make. I could see actually in my schooling people who were there trying to do their own work by being in school.
Right.
And nothing wrong with wanting to do their work, but it was probably, I felt it could have been beneficial to get a little more help and then proceed into the helping place.
Well, and what we know is learning and education is never a substitute for recovery.
Right.
And if I begin the process of learning too quickly, then it can actually derail the personal experiential work that I'm doing of transformation.
Right.
And, and this is part of my story. I went back and got a degree unconsciously, wanting it to be the thing that would help me to recover. And I often say, if I had spent the money in rehab that I spent on my doctoral degree, I would have been much further down the road sooner. But I didn't know I was doing that. It just became more evident later.
Right.
So having stability in your recovery, having confidence in your recovery, being further down the road, I think will be important. Well, we're going to continue the conversation because Susie's not the only one that is making a professional transition. And so when we come back, we're going to be talking about Russ and the journey that he's been on that will bring him to this place full-time, working with Susie as a partner, working with individual men as well as couples.
Russ and Susie, thanks a lot for joining us on the podcast today. And as Greg just said, we look forward to part 2 of this conversation with Russ and Susie Smidt. In the meantime, if you have discovered Faithful and True because you are searching for help, we invite you to visit faithfulandtrue.com. If you're a man that is struggling with sexual purity issues or sexual addiction, pornography, any of those issues, we invite you to look into our men's workshop, which we offer every month. The December workshop, we're excited to share, is full. So we are looking forward to, we do it every month. So take a look at those dates for January and February, and hopefully you can fit us into your schedule. Until then, we hope that the coming week for you is going to be a week that's filled with many blessings and great vision.